The morning light filtered through the heavy silk curtains of our bedroom, casting shadows across Adriano's empty side of the bed. His sheets were cold, had been cold for months now. I traced my fingers over the smooth fabric, remembering when mornings meant his arms around me, his breath warm against my neck, whispered promises in Italian that made my heart race. That was 2 years ago, before the wedding, before everything changed. I pushed myself up from the bed, my reflection catching in the full-length mirror across the room. The woman staring back at me bore little resemblance to the Sophia who had walked down the aisle in that stunning Valentino gown. My nightgown hung loosely over curves that had expanded gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. The extra weight settled around my hips, my thighs, my middle. Evidence of comfort eating, of filling the void that grew between Adriano and me with tiramisu and pasta carbonara and bottles of Chianti drunk alone. I turned away from my reflection, unable to bear the sight any longer. The clock on the nightstand read 6:47 a.m. Adriano had left for his morning business hours ago, as he did every day now. Our penthouse apartment overlooking the city felt more like a museum than a home. Beautiful, expensive, and utterly lifeless. In the kitchen, I prepared espresso with mechanical precision, the same ritual I'd performed every morning for the past 3 years. The machine hissed and gurgled, filling the silence with something other than the echo of my own thoughts. I added a splash of cream, watching it swirl into the dark liquid like smoke. Buongiorno, Signora Bianchi. Maria, our housekeeper, appeared in the doorway, her kind eyes taking in my disheveled appearance with practiced neutrality. She'd been with Adriano's family for decades, had watched him grow from a boy into the powerful man who now controlled half the city's underground operations. Buongiorno, Maria. I managed a smile that felt like a mask. Did Adriano eat before he left? No, Signora. He took only coffee as usual. She busied herself with preparing breakfast that I wouldn't eat, that Adriano wouldn't return home in time for. Shall I prepare your usual? My usual. 2 pieces of toast with butter and jam, fruit, sometimes pastries from the bakery down the street. Food had become my comfort, my companion, my silent rebellion against the loneliness that filled every corner of this beautiful prison. Just the coffee today, Maria. Thank you. She paused, her wrinkled hands stilling over the cutting board. Signora, you must eat. You are too thin already. The lie was kind, but we both knew the truth. I'd gained nearly 20 pounds since the wedding. 20 pounds that stood between me and the woman Adriano had desired so desperately during our courtship. 20 pounds that had somehow extinguished the fire in his eyes when he looked at me. My phone buzzed on the marble counter. A text from Lucia, my only real friend in this city of Adriano's associates, and their perfectly coiffed wives. Coffee at noon. I have news. I replied quickly. I'll be there. At least Lucia's boutique offered an escape. A place where I could pretend to be someone other than the neglected wife of a Mafia boss. The hours until noon crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to read, to occupy myself with the Italian language lessons I'd been taking, to do anything but think about the growing chasm between Adriano and me. But my mind kept returning to the same painful memories. The way he used to pull me close in public, possessive and proud. The way he'd whispered "Mia bellissima" against my skin. The way he'd looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Now, he barely looked at me at all. Lucia's boutique was tucked into a quiet street in the historic district, its windows displaying elegant dresses that would never fit my current body. The bell chimed as I entered, and Lucia emerged from the back room, her slender figure wrapped in a crimson dress that hugged every perfect curve. Sofia, finalmente. She kissed both my cheeks, her perfume expensive and subtle. You look tired, Cara. Are you sleeping? As well as can be expected. I followed her to the small sitting area at the back of the shop, where she'd prepared espresso and biscotti. What's your news? Lucia's expression grew serious, her dark eyes searching my face. "I'm not sure I should tell you, but as your friend, I think you deserve to know." My stomach tightened. "Know what?" "There's been talk." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "About Adriano." Of course there was talk. There was always talk in their world, whispers of deals and betrayals, of power shifting like sand. But something in Lucia's tone told me this was different. "What kind of talk?" "That he's been seen with someone." Lucia's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "At Ristorante Vincenzo, twice in the past week." The bottom fell out of my world. Ristorante Vincenzo, where Adriano and I had our first date, where he'd told me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, where he'd kissed me for the first time under the stars on their private terrace. "Who?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "I don't know. My source only said she was young, beautiful. But Sophia..." Lucia leaned forward, her voice urgent. "This doesn't mean anything happened. You know how these men are. They meet with many people for business. But I knew Adriano. Knew the difference between his business meetings, tense, calculated, always with at least 2 of his men present, and his personal time. If he was at Vincenzo with a woman, it wasn't business." "How long have you known?" I asked, pulling my hand away. Lucia's silence was answer enough. "How long, Lucia?" 3 weeks. Guilt flickered across her face. "I didn't want to tell you until I was certain, until I had more information." 3 weeks. 21 days of smiling at me, of civil morning greetings, of sleeping in the same bed while touching another woman, or thinking about touching her, or simply wanting to touch her in ways he no longer wanted to touch me. I stood abruptly, the room spinning slightly. "I need to go." "Sophia, wait." But I was already moving toward the door, desperate for air, for space, for anything but the suffocating weight of this new knowledge. The walk back to the penthouse passed in a blur. My mind raced through possibilities, through memories, searching for signs I'd missed. Had there been lipstick on his collar? Late-night phone calls he took in another room? Unexplained absences? But the truth was simpler and more devastating. Adriano hadn't needed to hide an affair because he'd already left me in every way that mattered. The physical distance was just the final confirmation of an emotional departure that had happened slowly, imperceptibly, over the past 2 years. When I entered the penthouse, Adriano was there, a rare occurrence during daylight hours. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian too low for me to hear. His suit jacket was draped over a chair, his white shirt crisp and perfectly fitted to his broad shoulders. Even now, after everything, the sight of him made my breath catch. He ended the call as I approached, turning to face me with an expression of polite inquiry, as if I were a business associate. A stranger. "Sophia, I didn't expect you back so soon. We need to talk." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Wariness, perhaps, or guilt. About us. About why you can't even look at me anymore." The words tumbled out, 2 years of silence and suffering finally breaking through. "About the woman you've been seeing at Vincenzo." His jaw tightened, the only sign I'd struck a nerve. "There is no woman. Don't lie to me, Adriano. Not after everything else." "I'm not lying." His voice remained calm, controlled. "I've had business meetings there. Nothing more." "Business meetings that require taking someone to our restaurant? The place where we fell in love?" My voice cracked, betraying the tears I was fighting. "Do I look that stupid to you?" He moved toward me then, his hand reaching out before dropping back to his side, as if even the thought of touching me was distasteful. "Sophia, you're upset. You're imagining things. The only thing I'm imagining is that you still care about this marriage." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. "When did you stop wanting me, Adriano? Was it the wedding night? The week after? Or did it happen gradually, so slowly that I didn't notice until I was completely alone?" His expression shuddered, that familiar wall of ice descending. "I don't know what you want me to say." "The truth." The word came out as a shout, startling us both. "I want you to tell me the truth. Why won't you touch me? Why do you leave before I wake up and come home after I'm asleep? Why do you look at me like I'm a stranger?" Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I watched emotions flicker across his face. Anger, frustration, something that might have been pain. But when he finally spoke, his voice was empty. "I've been busy. The business requires... Don't." I cut him off, exhausted by the excuses. "Don't insult me by pretending this is about business. I've been your wife for 2 years, Adriano. I know the difference between busy and absent, between tired and indifferent." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "What do you want from me, Sophia?" "I want my husband back." The tears came now, hot and unstoppable. "I want the man who couldn't keep his hands off me, who looked at me like I was precious, who made me feel beautiful and desired and loved." "People change," he said quietly, and those 2 words held more cruelty than any insult. "Marriages change." "Into what?" "Into this." I gestured at the space between us, at the cold distance that had become our normal. "Into 2 people living separate lives under the same roof." He turned back to the window, his shoulders rigid. "I provide for you. You want for nothing. Isn't that enough?" "No." The word was simple, final. "It's not enough. It's never been enough." When he didn't respond, didn't even turn to look at me, something inside me broke. Not the sharp pain of a sudden wound, but the slow crumbling of something that had been dying for months. My marriage. My self-worth. My hope. "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, everything stopped. Adriano's shoulders stiffened, his hand gripping the window frame so tightly his knuckles went white. "No." "It's not your decision to make." He turned then, his face a mask of cold fury. "You're my wife, Sophia. That's not something you can simply walk away from." "Watch me." I was shaking now, adrenaline and heartbreak flooding my system. "I won't spend another day feeling invisible in my own home. I won't keep pretending that everything is fine when you can't even stand to be in the same room as me." "This is ridiculous." His voice rose, control slipping for the first time. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest, something you clearly can't manage." I moved toward the bedroom, needing to be away from him, from this conversation, from the ruins of everything I'd believed in. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours. I want nothing from you except my freedom." "Sophia." His hand caught my arm, and the touch, the first real touch in months, sent electricity through me. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I pulled away from his grasp and walked into the bedroom, closing the door between us with a quiet click that felt like the end of everything. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence of the penthouse. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding, as Adriano's voice erupted from his study, a string of Italian curses punctuated by what sounded like furniture being overturned. I'd seen him angry before, had witnessed the cold, calculating fury he wielded like a weapon in his business dealings. But this was different. This was raw, uncontrolled. It had been 3 days since I'd asked for a divorce. 3 days of deafening silence broken only by the sound of doors closing. of footsteps in separate rooms, of a marriage dying in slow motion. I pressed myself against the wall as Stefano, Adriano's younger brother, emerged from the study with his hands raised in a placating gesture. His eyes widened when he saw me, guilt flashing across his features. "Sophia, I didn't know you were home." "What's happening?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Stefano glanced back toward the study, where more crashing sounds echoed. "He's processing. The divorce papers arrived an hour ago." I'd moved quickly, contacting the best divorce attorney in the city who wasn't on Adriano's payroll. Signora Benedetti was a steel-spined woman in her 60s who'd built her reputation on taking down powerful men. She'd listened to my story with shrewd eyes and agreed to take my case. "He needs to sign them," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Sophia, please." Stefano moved closer, his voice low and urgent. "Whatever's happening between you two, there has to be another way. Divorce isn't what? Acceptable? Allowed?" I laughed bitterly. "I'm not asking for permission, Stefano. I'm done." Another crash from the study, followed by Adriano's roar of frustration. The sound made my chest ache despite everything. "He loves you," Stefano said quietly. "I know it doesn't seem like it right now, but he does. He's lost his way. He's had 2 years to find it again." I straightened, gathering what little remained of my courage. "I'm going to my room. Tell him the papers are straightforward. I want nothing from him except my freedom." As I walked away, I heard Stefano mutter something in Italian that sounded like a prayer. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in the guest room I'd moved into, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar silence of the penthouse. Usually, I could hear the faint sounds of Adriano moving through the apartment. The clink of a glass being set down, the low murmur of his voice on late-night phone calls, the soft padding of his footsteps. Tonight, there was nothing. Around 2 a.m., my door opened. I knew without looking that it was Adriano, knew the particular weight of his footsteps, the way he moved through darkness with absolute certainty. "Sophia." His voice was rough, as if he'd been shouting or perhaps crying, though I couldn't imagine Adriano Bianchi crying. "Are you awake?" I didn't answer, didn't move. If I acknowledged him, I'd have to face the conversation I'd been dreading. He crossed to the bed, and I felt him sit on the edge of the mattress. The springs dipped under his weight, and suddenly he was close enough that I could smell him. Expensive cologne mixed with whiskey and something darker, more desperate. "I know you're not sleeping." His hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers wrapping around my palm with a gentleness that made my heart stutter. "Please, just talk to me." There's nothing left to say. I kept my eyes closed, afraid that if I looked at him, I'd lose my resolve. "I'm not signing the papers." My eyes flew open then, and I pulled my hand from his grasp. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, I could make out his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the dark shadows under his eyes, the disheveled state of his usually immaculate hair. "You don't have a choice. There's always a choice." He turned to face me, and the intensity in his gaze stole my breath. "I choose you, Sophia. I choose us. Now?" Anger flared hot and bright in my chest. "Now you choose us. After 2 years of nothing? After months of you treating me like I don't exist? I made mistakes." His hand reached for mine again, and this time I let him take it, if only because I was too tired to fight. I know I did, but divorce isn't the answer. Then what is? I sat up, pulling the blanket around myself like armor. "Tell me, Adriano, what's the answer? How do we fix a marriage where one person doesn't even want to touch the other?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That's not—" "Don't lie to me." My voice cracked. "Not anymore. Just tell me the truth." Why did you stop wanting me?" The silence that followed was crushing. I watched emotions play across his face. Shame, guilt, something that looked almost like fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You didn't stop being beautiful, Sophia. I did. I stopped being the man you deserved." "What does that mean?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window like a caged animal. The business, the pressure, the constant threat of violence, of betrayal. It changed me, made me harder, colder. I couldn't... He broke off, his shoulders sagging. "I couldn't be the man you needed, and the man my position demanded. So you chose the business over me." "No." He turned back to me, his eyes blazing with something raw and painful. "I chose to protect you, to keep that world away from what we had. But in doing so, I pushed you away too. That's convenient." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "Blaming your neglect on some noble attempt at protection. It's the truth. The truth is you stopped seeing me, Adriano. You stopped touching me, talking to me, caring about me. And you expect me to believe it was all for my own good?" He moved toward the bed again, and this time when he reached for me, I didn't pull away. His hands cupped my face with a tenderness I hadn't felt in so long it made my throat tight with unshed tears. "Look at me, Sophia. Really look at me." I did, and what I saw shocked me. This wasn't the cold, distant stranger who'd shared my bed for the past 2 years. This was Adriano, my Adriano, vulnerable and desperate and afraid. "I never stopped wanting you," he whispered, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "I stopped believing I deserved you. That's not... Every day you became more beautiful, more kind, more everything I could never be. And I'm..." He laughed bitterly. "I'm a monster, Sophia. A man who hurts people for a living, who makes decisions that cost lives. How could I touch you with these hands? How could I bring that darkness into your light?" Tears spilled down my cheeks as understanding began to dawn. "So you just... stopped?" "I thought it was better, cleaner. If I kept my distance, maybe you'd stay pure, stay untouched by what I am." "You idiot." The words came out as half laugh, half sob. "Don't you understand? I never wanted pure. I wanted you. All of you. Darkness included." His hands tightened on my face. "The weight you gained. Don't." I tried to pull away, but he held firm. "Let me finish, please." He took a shaky breath. "I noticed. Of course I noticed. But it wasn't..." He struggled with the words. "I thought you were happy. Content. That maybe you'd found something in food that I couldn't give you anymore. And I hated myself for it. You never said anything. What was I supposed to say? That I'd destroyed our marriage so thoroughly that my wife had to find comfort in other things? That I'd failed you so completely, you didn't even feel beautiful anymore?" Fresh tears came, harder now. Because he was right. Every pound I'd gained was a layer of protection, a physical manifestation of the emotional barrier between us. I'd eaten to fill the void he'd left, to comfort myself when his coldness became unbearable. "I'm signing the papers," he said suddenly, his voice steady despite the tears I could now see on his own face. "If that's what you truly want, I won't fight you. But Sophia," his forehead pressed against mine, "give me 1 month, 30 days to prove that I can be the man you married, the man you deserve. Adriano, please, ti prego, amore mio." The endearment, spoken in his native tongue, nearly broke me. "If after 30 days you still want the divorce, I'll sign without question. But let me try. Let me show you that I haven't forgotten how to love you." Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a mistake, that pretty words wouldn't fix 2 years of neglect, that I should walk away while I still had the strength. But my heart, my stupid, stubborn heart, whispered a different truth. That I still loved this man. That I'd never stopped loving him, even when loving him hurt. 1 month, I heard myself say. But Adriano, if you hurt me again, I won't. I swear on everything I hold sacred, I won't. He kissed me then, and it was like coming home after a long exile. His lips were warm and soft, and tasted of whiskey and salt from his tears. His hands trembled as they slid into my hair, cradling my head like I was something precious and fragile. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine again. Tomorrow, he whispered. Tomorrow I start making this right. But as I watched him leave my room, saw the set of his shoulders and the determined line of his jaw, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both standing on the edge of a cliff. 1 month to save a marriage that had been dying for 2 years. 1 month to decide if love was enough. The morning after our midnight conversation, I woke to the smell of coffee and something sweet. Vanilla, perhaps, or cinnamon. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, that I'd slipped back in time to those early days when Adriano would surprise me with breakfast in bed, when every morning felt like a promise. I opened my eyes to find him standing in the doorway of the guest room, holding a tray with careful precision. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a white linen shirt with the first 4 buttons undone, his hair still damp from the shower. The morning light caught the silver at his temples, the strong lines of his jaw, and I was struck by how handsome he was, how he'd always been, even when I'd convinced myself I no longer cared. Buongiorno, bellissima, he said softly, the endearment falling from his lips like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say. I made your favorite, cornetti with Nutella and fresh fruit, and your coffee, 1 sugar, splash of cream, exactly as you like it. I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around myself, suddenly conscious of my rumpled appearance, my morning breath, the extra weight that made me feel exposed in the thin nightgown. But Adriano's gaze held only warmth as he approached, setting the tray carefully across my lap. You didn't have to do this, I said, my voice still rough with sleep. I wanted to. He sat on the edge of the bed, his weight causing the mattress to dip. I want to do a lot of things differently, Sophia. Starting today. The cornetto was perfect, flaky and warm, the Nutella melted into sweet ribbons. I ate slowly, aware of his eyes on me, of the way he watched each bite as if memorizing the moment. I canceled my morning meetings, he said after a while. All of them. I thought perhaps we could spend the day together, if you'd like. I paused mid-bite, studying his face for signs of deception or duty. But all I saw was genuine hope, tinged with nervousness that seemed foreign on a man who commanded fear and respect from half the city. Doing what? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Whatever you want, amore. We could visit the botanical gardens you're always mentioning, or that small gallery in the old quarter. Or we could simply stay here and talk. Really talk, like we used to. The offer was tempting, dangerously so. But 2 years of disappointment had made me wary. I have an appointment with Signora Benedetti this afternoon to discuss the divorce proceedings. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Then we have this morning. Will you give me that much? Against my better judgment, I agreed. We spent the morning in the botanical gardens, walking slowly through paths lined with roses and jasmine. Adriano held my hand. Actually held it, his fingers laced through mine with the same possessive tenderness I remembered from our courtship. We talked about small things at first, the weather, the flowers, a book I'd been reading. But gradually, carefully, we began to excavate the ruins of our marriage. When did it start? I asked, as we sat on a bench beneath a pergola heavy with wisteria. When did you first pull away? He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. Do you remember the Moretti incident about 3 months after the wedding? I did. Adriano had come home late one night, his knuckles bruised and split, his shirt stained with what I'd pretended not to recognize as blood. He'd refused to talk about it, had simply showered and climbed into bed with his back to me. I killed a man that night, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. Not the first time, not the last. But it was the first time I came home to you afterward. And I looked at you sleeping there, so peaceful, so innocent. And I felt... He swallowed hard. I felt filthy, contaminated, like I had no right to touch you with hands that had just taken a life. Adriano. After that, every time I touched you, all I could think about was what these hands had done, what they would do again. I started finding excuses not to come to bed, to leave early, to keep distance between us so that maybe you wouldn't see the monster I'd become. I never saw a monster, I said quietly. I saw my husband shutting me out. I saw a man who'd made vows to me and then acted like I didn't exist. I know. Dio, I know. He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes searching mine. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself, from having to face what I'd become, from seeing the disgust in your eyes when you finally understood what I do, who I really am. I knew who you were when I married you, Adriano. Maybe I didn't know all the details, but I knew the broad strokes. You were never just a legitimate businessman to me. And the weight? The question came out hesitant, almost fearful. When did that start? I pulled my hand from his, wrapping my arms around myself. About 6 months after you stopped touching me. I'd try everything, new lingerie, new perfume, staying up to wait for you. But you just looked through me like I was invisible. And I started to wonder if it was because I wasn't attractive enough anymore. If I'd let myself go, and that's why you didn't want me. That's not. So I'd eat, I continued, the words flowing like a dam had burst. I'd eat to comfort myself, to fill the empty space you'd left. And then I'd hate myself for it, because I'd gained more weight, which made you want me even less, which made me eat more. It was a vicious cycle, and I couldn't break it because the alternative was facing how alone I felt in my own marriage. Adriano's hand covered his mouth, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Madonna Santa Sofia, what have I done to you? You broke my heart, I said simply. Slowly, quietly, over 2 years. You broke it so thoroughly that I didn't even recognize myself anymore. He reached for me then, pulling me against his chest, despite my initial resistance. His arms wrapped around me with a desperation that felt like drowning and salvation all at once. Let me fix it, he whispered into my hair. Let me spend every day for the rest of my life making this right. Please, amore, give me the chance to prove that I haven't forgotten how to love you. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But believing meant risking my heart again, meant opening myself up to the possibility of being shattered once more. Actions, Adriano, I said, pulling back to look at him. Not words. I need to see change, not just hear promises. Then watch me, he said, his voice fierce with determination. Watch me prove it every single day. The afternoon appointment with Signora Benedetti was tense. She sat across from me in her elegant office, her steel-gray hair pulled back severely, her sharp eyes taking in my conflicted expression. You're having second thoughts, she observed, not unkindly. He wants 30 days, I admitted, to prove he can change, to save the marriage. Signora Benedetti leaned back in her leather chair, steepling her fingers. Sophia, in my 40 years of practice, I've seen many women give their husbands second chances. Sometimes it works. More often, it simply postpones the inevitable and causes more pain in the process. But sometimes it works. Sometimes. She opened a folder on her desk. The question you need to ask yourself is this: is he changing because he genuinely recognizes his mistakes and wants to be a better husband? Or is he changing because he's afraid of losing his possession? The word possession hit me like a physical blow. Was that what I was to Adriano? Another asset to be controlled and kept? I don't know, I whispered. Then use these 30 days wisely. Watch not just what he does for you, but how he treats others when he thinks you're not looking. Pay attention to whether he's really changing or just performing change. She slid the folder toward me. These are the divorce papers. I'm filing them as planned. The 30-day waiting period before the hearing gives you time to decide. If he truly changes, if you truly believe this marriage can be saved, we can withdraw the petition. But Sophia, her gaze sharpened. Don't mistake loneliness for love, and don't mistake fear of being alone for a reason to stay. I left her office with the folder clutched to my chest, her words echoing in my mind. That evening, Adriano was waiting when I returned to the penthouse. But he wasn't alone. Stefano sat on the sofa, and standing near the windows was Marco Esposito, Adriano's most trusted lieutenant, a barrel-chested man with scarred knuckles and surprisingly kind eyes. Sophia, Adriano said, standing as I entered. I want to apologize. Properly. In front of witnesses, so you know I mean every word. I stood frozen in the entryway, my heart hammering against my ribs. Adriano crossed to me, then did something I'd never seen him do. He dropped to one knee, taking my hand in both of his. Sofia Romano Bianchi, I have failed you as a husband. I have been cold when I should have been warm, distant when I should have been present, silent when I should have spoken truth. I have allowed my own shame and fear to poison the most precious thing in my life. You. His voice cracked slightly. I cannot undo the past 2 years. I cannot erase the pain I've caused. But I can promise you, here, in front of my brother and my most trusted friend, that I will spend every day earning back your trust, your love, your faith in me. Tears streamed down my face as I looked from Adriano to Stefano, who nodded encouragingly, to Marco, whose weathered face held unexpected compassion. I know words are cheap, Adriano continued. I know I need to prove myself through actions, but I want you to know that this isn't just about preventing a divorce. This is about becoming the man who deserves to call you his wife, the man you fell in love with, the man I lost sight of in the darkness of my own making. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal not a new ring, but my original engagement ring, the one I'd stopped wearing months ago when it became too tight for my swollen fingers. I had it resized, he said softly, to fit you exactly as you are now, because you are beautiful, Sophia. Every curve, every change, every single part of you is beautiful. And I've been a blind fool not to see it, not to worship it the way you deserve. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, a glittering symbol of promises both old and new. 30 days, he said, rising to his feet but keeping my hand in his. Let me show you that I mean every word. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, so I simply nodded. Stefano and Marco excused themselves quietly, leaving us alone in the gathering twilight. Adriano led me to the sofa, pulling me down beside him. I've made other changes too, he said. I've hired a second-in-command to handle the day-to-day operations. Marco will take over most of the late-night business. I've restructured my schedule so that I'm home every evening by 7, and I don't take calls after 9 unless it's an absolute emergency. Adriano, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing away fresh tears. Because you were right. I chose the business over you, over us. And that was the worst mistake of my life. So I'm choosing differently now. I'm choosing you. That night, for the first time in 2 years, we fell asleep together in our marriage bed. We didn't make love. That intimacy still felt too fragile, too dangerous. But Adriano held me close, his arms wrapped around me from behind, his breath warm against my neck. I love you, he whispered into the darkness. I never stopped. I just forgot how to show it. I laced my fingers through his, pressing his hand against my heart. Prove it, I whispered back, every single day. I will, he promised. I swear it. And as I drifted off to sleep, cocooned in the warmth of his embrace, I allowed myself to hope. Just a little. Just enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be enough. The days that followed unfolded like a dream I was afraid to wake from. Adriano kept every promise. He was home every evening by 7, often earlier. He cooked dinner with me, or rather, I cooked while he sat at the kitchen island, watching me with an intensity that made my hands shake and my heart race. He asked about my day, my thoughts, my dreams. He listened like every word I spoke was precious. On the 5th day, he surprised me with tickets to the opera, La Traviata, my favorite. We dressed formally, and when I emerged from the bedroom in the evening gown Lucia had helped me select, Adriano's sharp intake of breath made me blush. Bellissima, he murmured, his eyes traveling over me with undisguised hunger. Absolutely stunning. For the first time in 2 years, I felt beautiful under his gaze. On the 10th day, I found him in his study, and what I saw made me pause in the doorway. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian, but his tone was different. Softer, more patient than I'd heard him use in business calls. See, I understand. No, take the time you need. Family comes first. He paused, listening. Your daughter's health is more important than any shipment. We'll reschedule. Take care of her. He ended the call and looked up to find me watching him. What? He asked, a small smile playing at his lips. You're different, I said. Even in business, you're gentler. He stood, crossing to me and pulling me into his arms. You're changing me, Sophia, making me remember that there's more to life than power and control, that the people who work for me have families, lives, struggles that matter. I'm not doing anything. You're doing everything. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, the tip of my nose. Just by existing, by giving me the chance to be better. On the 15th day, the halfway point of our 30-day agreement, Lucia came to visit. I hadn't seen her since our lunch, and her eyes widened when she saw Adriano answer the door, saw the easy way he kissed my temple as I approached, saw the contentment on my face. Madonna, she breathed when we were alone in my bedroom. What happened? You're glowing. He's trying, I said simply. Really trying. And? Is it working? I looked at my reflection in the mirror, at the woman who looked softer, less guarded than she had 2 weeks ago. I think so. But I'm scared, Lucia. I'm terrified of believing again, of letting my guard down only to have him retreat back into that cold stranger. Then don't let your guard down completely, she advised, taking my hands in hers. Hope for the best, but protect yourself. And Sophia, her expression grew serious. Make sure he knows what you need, not just what he thinks you need. That evening, I took Lucia's advice to heart. When Adriano and I sat down to dinner, pasta carbonara he'd insisted on making himself, though I'd had to coach him through every step, I brought up something that had been weighing on me. Adriano, I want to start seeing a therapist. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. A therapist? For me, For us, if you're willing. But definitely for me. I set down my own fork, meeting his gaze steadily. These past 2 years have done damage that won't heal with just romantic gestures and apologies. I need help processing everything. And I need tools to make sure I never lose myself like that again. For a moment, I thought he might resist, might see it as a threat or an insult. But then he nodded slowly. Of course, whatever you need. And yes, I'll come with you, if you want me there. I do. We need to learn how to talk to each other again. Really talk, without the walls we've both built up. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. Thank you for still fighting for us, Sophia. For not giving up completely. I haven't decided yet, I reminded him gently. We still have 15 days left. I know. And I intend to make every single one count. He kept that promise. On day 17, he took me to the beach house we'd visited on our honeymoon, but hadn't returned to since. We walked along the shore at sunset, his arm around my waist, and he told me stories from his childhood. Stories of his mother, who died when he was 12, of learning to be strong when all he wanted was to be soft. My father taught me that emotion was weakness, he said, staring out at the waves. That to survive in our world, you had to be harder than stone, colder than ice. I became exactly what he wanted me to be, and in the process, I forgot how to be human. You're human, Adriano. You've always been human. I didn't feel human, not for a long time. But with you, he turned to me, his dark eyes reflecting the dying light. With you, I remember what it's like to feel, to care about something more than power or survival. On day 22, we attended our first therapy session. Dr. Marissa Chen was a woman in her 50s with gentle eyes and an unflinching ability to cut through our carefully constructed defenses. Tell me, she said, looking at Adriano, why you think your wife wanted a divorce. Because I failed her, he answered without hesitation. I withdrew emotionally and physically. I made her feel unwanted and unloved. And why did you withdraw? The muscles in his jaw worked as he struggled with the answer. Finally, because I was ashamed of what I do, of what I am. I didn't think I deserved her. Dr. Chen nodded, then turned to me. And you, Sophia, why did you stay as long as you did? The question caught me off guard. Because I loved him. Because I kept hoping he'd come back to me. And when did you stop hoping? I thought about that moment in Lucia's boutique, the moment I'd learned about the woman at Vincenzo. But that hadn't been when I'd stopped hoping. I'd stopped hoping months before that, in 1,000 tiny moments of rejection and indifference. When I realized he wasn't coming back, I said softly. When I understood that the man I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as an obligation rather than a choice. And now? Dr. Chen looked between us. What's changed? I'm fighting for her, Adriano said, his hand finding mine. For us. I'm choosing her every day. Actions matter, I added. He's showing me, not just telling me. We left that session emotionally drained, but somehow lighter, as if excavating our pain had created space for something new to grow. On day 28, 2 days before our 30-day deadline, I woke to find Adriano already awake beside me, propped up on one elbow, watching me sleep. Buongiorno, amore, he murmured, his free hand tracing the curve of my hip through the silk nightgown. You're staring, I said, suddenly self-conscious despite the weeks of his consistent attention. I'm memorizing. Every curve, every line, every beautiful detail. His hand continued its slow exploration, and I felt heat bloom in my core. Sophia, I want to make love to you. Not because I think it will convince you to stay, but because I've missed you. Missed touching you, tasting you, being one with you. My breath caught. We'd been intimate in small ways over the past weeks. Kisses that lingered, touches that promised more. But nothing like this. Nothing so direct, so hungry. I'm scared, I admitted. Of me? Of hoping. Of believing this is real only to have it snatched away again. He shifted, hovering over me, his weight braced on his forearms. Then let me prove it. Let me worship you the way you deserve. Let me show you that this body... His lips brushed my collarbone. Every inch of it is beautiful to me. That you are beautiful to me. When I nodded, trembling, he began a slow, reverent exploration that erased 2 years of doubt and pain. He took his time, murmuring words of worship in Italian as he learned my body all over again, paying special attention to the places where I'd changed, where I'd added softness and curves. Sei perfetta, he whispered against my skin. Perfect. Sei la mia vita. You are my life. And as we moved together in the morning light, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not forgiveness. That would take more time. But hope. Real, fragile, terrifying hope. Afterward, we lay tangled together, his hand resting possessively on my hip. 2 more days, he said quietly. And then you decide. I turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. I need you to understand something, Adriano. If I stay, if I withdraw the divorce petition, it can't go back to how it was. We keep going to therapy. You keep making time for us. And if you ever shut me out like that again, I won't. Te lo giuro. He kissed me fiercely. I swear it, on my life, on my honor, on everything I hold sacred. I will never take you for granted again. Then ask me, I whispered. Ask me what you want to know. His eyes searched mine, vulnerable and hopeful. Will you stay, Sophia? Will you give us another chance? And despite every rational warning, despite the fear still lodged in my chest, despite the scars that hadn't fully healed, I heard myself answer, yes. The morning after I agreed to stay, I woke to find Adriano's side of the bed empty again. For a moment, panic seized my chest. Had last night been a dream? Had he already reverted to his old patterns, disappearing before dawn? Then I heard it. The soft clink of dishes from the kitchen, the rich aroma of espresso, and something else. Was he singing? I slipped out of bed, pulling on a silk robe, and padded quietly down the hallway. Adriano stood at the stove, dressed only in low-slung pajama pants, his muscled back moving as he whisked eggs in a bowl. He was indeed singing, badly, off-key, some old Italian love song his mother used to play. The domesticity of the scene made my throat tight with emotion. You're awake, he said without turning around, and I realized he'd been watching my reflection in the window above the sink. I was trying to surprise you with breakfast in bed. Sospesi miei piani, bellissima. Your plans aren't ruined, I said, crossing to him and wrapping my arms around his waist from behind. The warmth of his skin against my cheek felt like coming home. This is better. He turned in my embrace, pulling me close. Buongiorno, Mrs. Bianchi. How does it feel to have undivorced your husband? I laughed, actually laughed, and the sound felt foreign after so many months of silence and tears. Strange, terrifying, right. All 3? His hand slid down to cup my face, tilting it up so he could look into my eyes. I can work with that. We ate breakfast together at the kitchen island, our knees touching, stealing kisses between bites of fluffy scrambled eggs and fresh cornetti from the bakery downstairs. It was mundane and perfect, and I found myself memorizing every detail. The way the morning light caught the silver in his hair, the sound of his laugh when I teased him about his terrible singing, the possessive way his hand rested on my thigh throughout the meal. "I have something for you," he said after we'd finished eating. From his pocket, he produced a small envelope. "Open it." Inside was a reservation confirmation for a wellness resort in Tuscany. 2 weeks, starting next month. But it wasn't just any resort. I recognized the name from articles I'd read about holistic health retreats that focused on self-love and body positivity. "Adriano, this is for you," he interrupted gently. "Not because I think you need to change anything about your body, but because I know the past 2 years have been hard on your self-esteem, on how you see yourself. I want you to remember that you're beautiful, strong, worthy, with or without me." Tears pricked my eyes. "You're not coming?" "Only if you want me to. Otherwise, this is your time. To heal, to reconnect with yourself, to do whatever you need to do." He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "And when you come back, I'll be here, waiting, always waiting for you." The gesture was so thoughtful, so attuned to what I actually needed, rather than what he thought I needed, that I couldn't speak. I simply nodded, clutching the envelope to my chest. That afternoon, Stefano stopped by the penthouse. I'd been in the bedroom organizing my closet, a task I'd been avoiding because it meant confronting the clothes that no longer fit. The expensive designer pieces that hung like accusations of my failure to maintain the body Adriano had married. "Sofia, you have a visitor," Adriano called from the living room. I found Stefano standing awkwardly by the windows, holding a bouquet of white roses, my favorite. His young face was serious, older than his 28 years. "Stefano, you didn't have to?" "Yes, I did." He crossed to me, pressing the flowers into my hands. "I need to apologize. For the past 2 years, I watched my brother destroy his marriage and I said nothing. I should have intervened, should have forced him to confront what he was doing. Instead, I stayed silent, and you suffered for it." I glanced at Adriano, who stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Your brother is a grown man responsible for his own choices," I said carefully. "But family holds each other accountable," Stefano insisted. "That's what our mother taught us before she died. And I failed her. I failed you both." He turned to Adriano. "Fratello, you're my blood, but that doesn't mean I'll stand by silently if you ever hurt Sofia again. Capisce?" Something shifted in Adriano's expression. Surprise, perhaps, followed by respect. "Capisco, and I won't. Never again." Stefano nodded, satisfied, then turned back to me. "He's different, Sofia. I don't know if you've noticed, but he's different even with the men. More patient, more human. Whatever magic you worked, thank you. You gave me my brother back." After Stefano left, I confronted Adriano about it. What did he mean? Different with the men? Adriano sat on the sofa, pulling me down beside him. "I told you I was restructuring things. Part of that means changing how I operate. I've always ruled through fear. It's effective, keeps people in line. But it also makes you paranoid, isolated, constantly watching for betrayal. And now? Now I'm trying something radical. Respect. Treating the people who work for me like human beings with families and lives outside of my organization. It's strange, uncomfortable. But it's also liberating." He took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "You make me want to be better, Sofia. Not just as a husband, but as a man, as a leader, as a person." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding trust. Adriano kept every promise, came home early, attended our therapy sessions without complaint, made love to me with a reverence that made me cry. But there were still moments of doubt, flashes of fear that this was temporary, that he'd revert to the cold stranger who'd shared my bed for 2 years. Dr. Chen helped us navigate those moments in our weekly sessions. She taught us how to communicate without accusation, how to express needs without ultimatums, how to rebuild intimacy that had been shattered. Trust isn't rebuilt in grand gestures, she explained during one session. It's rebuilt in small, consistent actions over time. Adriano, you need to understand that even though Sophia has agreed to stay, her trust is still fragile. One broken promise could undo months of progress. I won't break my promises, Adriano said firmly, his hand tightening on mine. Not intentionally, perhaps. But life happens. Emergencies arise. The question is, how will you handle those moments when something threatens to pull you back into old patterns? It was a prophetic question. 2 weeks before my scheduled trip to Tuscany, a crisis erupted in Adriano's organization. One of his key lieutenants, a man named Paolo who controlled the shipping operations, was arrested on racketeering charges. The arrest threatened to expose sensitive information that could bring down not just Paolo, but significant portions of Adriano's empire. I woke at 3 a.m. to find Adriano's side of the bed empty. My heart sank. This was it. The moment where the business would take precedence again, where I'd be pushed aside for more important concerns. I found him in his study, pacing while speaking rapid Italian into his phone. His face was drawn with stress, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. When he saw me in the doorway, he held up a finger, 1 minute, and continued his conversation. I turned to leave, to give him privacy, but his hand shot out and caught mine. He pulled me into the room, into his arms, holding me against his chest while he finished his call. Even in crisis, even under pressure, he was choosing not to shut me out. When he finally ended the call, he pressed his forehead against mine. I'm sorry I woke you. What's happening? He told me everything. The arrest, the potential exposure, the delicate negotiations happening to ensure Paolo's silence. In the old days, he would have handled this with threats and violence. Now, he was working through lawyers, through legitimate channels, trying to protect his people without resorting to the brutal tactics that had defined his father's reign. I need to go to the office, he said. Meet with my attorneys. It could take all day, maybe longer. Here it was, the first real test of his promises. I waited for the familiar excuses, the dismissal, the assumption that I'd simply accept his absence. Instead, he cupped my face in his hands. Come with me. What? Come with me. I don't want to leave you, and I don't want to break my promise to be home for dinner. So come with me. Bring a book, work on your language lessons, whatever you want. Just be there. Be with me. It was an odd request, to spend the day in his office while he dealt with criminal attorneys and crisis management. But it was also an invitation into a part of his life he'd always kept separate, a gesture of inclusion rather than exclusion. Okay, I said. Give me 20 minutes to get dressed. His office was in a nondescript building downtown, deliberately unremarkable from the outside. But inside, it was pure Adriano. Sleek lines, dark wood, expensive art. I settled into a leather sofa in the corner of his office with my Italian grammar book while he worked, fielding calls and meeting with a parade of concerned associates. What struck me most was how he included me in small ways throughout the day. He'd catch my eye during tense phone calls and wink, silently communicating that everything would be okay. When his attorneys arrived for a strategy session, he introduced me not as my wife, but as Sophia, the most important person in my life. During lunch, takeout from a local trattoria, he insisted we eat together, asking about my opinion on the grammar exercises I'd been working on, as if we weren't in the middle of a crisis. Doesn't this bother you? I asked during a rare quiet moment. Me being here while you're trying to handle serious business? He looked up from the legal documents spread across his desk, his expression softening. Sophia, having you here is the only thing keeping me sane right now. Knowing you're close, that I don't have to choose between handling this crisis and keeping my promises to you. That's everything. By evening, the immediate crisis had been contained. Paolo's lawyer had negotiated a deal that protected both Paolo and Adriano's organization. It wasn't perfect, but it was resolved without violence, without anyone getting hurt. "Let's go home," Adriano said, standing and stretching his stiff shoulders. "I promised you dinner, and I intend to keep that promise even if I have to cook it myself." On the drive home, I studied his profile in the dimming light. You handled that differently than you would have before. Before, I would have threatened Paolo's family until he had no choice but to stay silent. Or worse. His jaw tightened. I would have solved the problem through fear and violence. It would have been faster, more certain. But it also would have cost me a piece of my soul. And it would have cost me you. He reached over, taking my hand and pressing it to his lips. "Some things aren't worth the price anymore, Amore. I'm learning that the hard way." The incident became a turning point. Adriano had been tested, faced with the kind of crisis that would have consumed him in the past, and he'd chosen differently. He'd chosen us. A week later, Lucia invited me to lunch at her boutique. When I arrived, I found her beaming, practically bouncing with excitement. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, laughing at her enthusiasm. "What's going on is that you look happy," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Really, genuinely happy. The shadows are gone from your eyes, Sophia. And you're..." She pulled back, studying me with a knowing smile. "You're glowing." I blushed, thinking of the night before, of Adriano's hands on my skin, his whispered words of worship. "He's really trying, Lucia. It's not perfect. We still have moments where old fears creep in, but it's real. He's really changed." "I can see that." She led me to the back of the boutique, where she'd set up a beautiful lunch spread. "But what about you? Have you changed? Are you still the woman who was so miserable she ate herself into depression? Or are you someone new?" The question hit harder than I expected. Had I changed? Or had I simply returned to who I was before the marriage fell apart? "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm still struggling with my weight, with how I see myself. Some days I look in the mirror and hate what I see. Other days, when Adriano looks at me like I'm the most beautiful woman in the world, I almost believe it." Lucia took my hands, her expression serious. "Sophia, listen to me. You need to learn to see yourself as beautiful independent of how Adriano sees you. What happens if he has a bad day and doesn't give you that look? Will you fall apart again? Will you go back to using food as comfort?" Her words were harsh but necessary. I'd been so focused on Adriano's journey, on his changes and growth, that I'd neglected my own healing. "The wellness retreat," I said suddenly. "That's why he booked it. Not just for relaxation, but for me to work on myself, on my own terms." "Smart man," Lucia said approvingly. "And you should go. Take that time. Figure out who Sofia Romano Bianchi is when she's not defined by her husband's attention or lack thereof." I left lunch with my mind spinning. Lucia was right. I needed to do my own work, my own healing. Adriano had changed, was changing, but I couldn't build my entire self-worth on his validation. That night, I broached the subject with Adriano over dinner. "I've been thinking about the Tuscany retreat. I want to go alone." He looked up from his pasta, and I saw a flash of hurt in his eyes before he masked it. "Of course. I told you it was your choice." "It's not because I don't want you there," I rushed to explain. "It's because I need this time for me, to work on myself, on how I see myself. Lucia pointed out today that I've been rebuilding my self-esteem based on your validation, and that's not healthy. I need to learn to see myself as worthy independent of you, Understanding dawned in his expression. You're absolutely right. And Sophia. He reached across the table, taking my hand. I want you to know that I see you as beautiful, not because of what you weigh or how you look, but because of who you are. Your kindness, your strength, your refusal to give up on us even when I gave you every reason to. That's what makes you beautiful to me. Tears pricked my eyes. I need to believe that about myself. Need to find that strength and worth inside me, not just reflected in your eyes. Then go. Take the 2 weeks. Do whatever you need to do. And know that when you come back, I'll be here, loving you exactly as you are. The next morning, as I packed for my trip, I found a note tucked into my suitcase. Adriano's bold handwriting filled the page. Mia bellissima Sophia. These past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life, not because of what we've recovered, but because of what we're building together. Something stronger, more honest than what we had before. Take this time for yourself. Discover your strength, your beauty, your worth, and know that every day you're gone, I'll be counting the hours until you return to me. With all my love, always. Adriano P.S. I've arranged for fresh flowers to be delivered to your room every morning. Not because I think you need reminders of me, but because you deserve beautiful things. I pressed the note to my chest, tears streaming down my face. This man, this complicated, flawed, beautiful man, had truly changed. And more importantly, he was giving me the space and support to change too. As the car pulled away from the penthouse, heading toward the airport, I looked back to see Adriano standing on the balcony, watching me leave. Not with the cold indifference of the past, but with love written plainly across his face. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to work on myself, to heal, to grow. And then I'd return to him, not as a broken woman seeking validation, but as a whole person choosing to share her life with someone who cherished her. For the first time in 2 years, I felt truly hopeful about our future. The Tuscan sun filtered through white linen curtains, warming my face as I woke on my first morning at Villa Serenita. The room was simple but elegant. Terracotta floors, exposed wooden beams, and those promised fresh flowers in a ceramic vase by the window. White peonies today, their sweet fragrance mingling with the scent of lavender from the gardens below. I'd arrived late the previous evening, too tired from travel to do more than collapse into the surprisingly comfortable bed. Now, in the gentle morning light, I took stock of my surroundings and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Peace. A knock at the door announced breakfast. Fresh fruit, yogurt with local honey, and strong Italian coffee. The note beside the tray was in flowing script. Buongiorno, Sophia. Your first session with Dr. Alessandra begins at 10 a.m. in the garden pavilion. Wear comfortable clothes. Come with an open heart. Bianca, your wellness concierge doctor, at. Alessandra Conti turned out to be a woman in her 60s with silver hair twisted into a loose knot and eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. She was waiting in a beautiful open-air pavilion surrounded by olive trees when I arrived, exactly on time. Sophia Bianchi, she said, rising to greet me with a warm embrace. Welcome. Please, sit. Tell me why you're here. I settled into the cushioned chair across from her, the morning breeze carrying the scent of rosemary and sage. My husband arranged this. He thought I needed time to work on myself. And what do you think? Her Italian accent was musical, soothing. I think he's right. I think I've spent 2 years hating myself, using food to fill a void, forgetting who I was before everything fell apart. The words tumbled out, 2 years of pain condensed into a few sentences. Dr. Alessandra nodded slowly. And who were you before? Before the marriage, before the pain. Who was Sophia? The question should have been simple. Instead, I found myself struggling to remember. Had I ever really known who I was, independent of relationships, of others' perceptions? I don't know, I whispered. I don't think I ever knew. Then let's find out together. She smiled, warm and encouraging. Over these next 2 weeks, we're going to strip away all the layers you've built up. The wife, the victim, the woman who lost herself. And we're going to discover who lives underneath all of that. The real Sophia. The days that followed were unlike anything I'd experienced. Each morning began with yoga at sunrise, moving my body in ways it hadn't moved in years. At first I was clumsy, self-conscious of my weight, of how the instructor, a lithe woman named Julia, moved with such fluid grace while I struggled with basic poses. But Julia was patient, kind. Your body is not your enemy. Sophia, she said during our third session, watching me nearly give up on a particularly difficult stretch. It's been carrying you through pain, through stress, through heartbreak. Thank it for its strength instead of punishing it for its changes. The concept was revolutionary. Thank my body? The body I'd spent 2 years resenting, hiding, trying to shrink through starvation and shame. Close your eyes, Julia instructed. Put your hand on your heart. Feel it beating. That heart has loved deeply, has broken, and healed. Thank it. Tears streamed down my face as I followed her instructions, feeling my heart's steady rhythm beneath my palm. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for keeping me alive when I wanted to disappear. Afternoons were spent in therapy sessions with Dr. Alessandra, excavating the roots of my pain. We talked about my childhood, growing up with a mother who prized beauty above all else, who put me on my first diet at age 12 when I'd gained weight during puberty. We talked about my relationships before Adriano, a string of men who'd valued my appearance, but never bothered to know the person inside. You've spent your entire life believing your worth is determined by how you look, Dr. Alessandra observed during our 5th session. By the numbers on a scale, the size of your clothes, the desire in a man's eyes. But Sophia, that's not where worth comes from. That's not where beauty lives. Then where does it live? I asked, desperate for an answer. She pressed her hand to my chest, right over my heart. Here, in your kindness, your resilience, your capacity to love even when loving hurts. That's real beauty, the kind that doesn't fade with time or change with weight. The retreat also included cooking classes, not dieting or restriction, but learning to appreciate food as nourishment and pleasure rather than punishment or comfort. Chef Marco taught us to prepare traditional Tuscan dishes, to savor each bite mindfully, to distinguish between physical hunger and emotional hunger. Food is not the enemy, he said, his weathered hands moving deftly as he demonstrated how to make fresh pasta. Food is life, celebration, connection. When we eat with shame or guilt, we poison the experience. When we eat with gratitude and presence, we nourish not just our bodies, but our souls. I called Adriano every evening, sitting on my small balcony as the sun set over the Tuscan hills. He always answered on the first ring, his voice warm and eager. Amore mio, how was your day? He'd ask, and I'd tell him about the yoga, the therapy, the small revelations that were reshaping how I saw myself. He never rushed me, never seemed impatient with my lengthy descriptions. He simply listened, occasionally asking questions that showed he was really hearing me, really understanding. I'm proud of you, he said on our 6th night apart, for doing this work, for being brave enough to face yourself. I miss you, I admitted, surprised by how much I meant it. 2 weeks ago, I'd been afraid to leave because I didn't trust that he'd still be there when I returned. Now I missed him because his absence left a genuine void. I miss you too, Bellissima. Every moment. But this time is important. Take all of it. Use it well. During the 2nd week, the focus shifted to body image work, We had group sessions where women of all ages and sizes shared their stories of struggle with self-acceptance. I listened to a 70-year-old widow talk about finally learning to love her body after her husband died. Not because she'd lost weight, but because she'd realized life was too short to waste hating herself. I heard a young woman in her 20s describe her recovery from an eating disorder, how she was learning that health and worth had nothing to do with size. "Your turn, Sophia," Dr. Alessandra prompted during one session. "What do you want to say to the woman you see in the mirror?" I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the therapy room, surrounded by the other women, and forced myself to really look. Not with the critical eye I'd been using for 2 years, cataloging flaws and failures, but with compassion, with curiosity. "I see a survivor," I said slowly, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "I see someone who endured 2 years of rejection and pain and didn't break completely. I see strength, resilience." My voice cracked. "I see someone who deserves love. Not because she's perfect, but because she's human." The women applauded, some wiping tears from their eyes. Dr. Alessandra stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Say it again, Sophia. Say it until you believe it. I deserve love. I deserve love. I deserve love." By the end of the second week, something fundamental had shifted inside me. I hadn't lost significant weight, maybe a few pounds from the healthier eating and daily yoga, but nothing dramatic. My body looked largely the same as when I'd arrived, but I looked at it differently. On my final evening at Villa Serenita, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and rose. My phone rang, Adriano right on schedule. "Amore, how are you feeling about coming home tomorrow?" "Nervous," I admitted. "Excited. Changed." "Changed how?" His voice was curious, not worried. "I'm not the same woman who left 2 weeks ago. I'm stronger, more certain of myself. And Adriano," I took a breath, "I need you to understand something. When I come home tomorrow, I'm not coming back because I need you to validate me or make me feel worthy. I'm coming back because I want to, because I choose you, but I'll be okay if I don't have you. For the first time in my life, I'll be okay on my own." There was a long pause. Then, "That's exactly how it should be, Sophia. That's exactly what I want for you. To choose me from a place of strength, not need. Are you sure? Because I won't go back to being that woman who crumbled without your attention. If we do this, if we really rebuild our marriage, it has to be as equals. As 2 whole people choosing each other, not 2 broken people clinging together. I wouldn't have it any other way." The emotion in his voice was palpable even through the phone. "Come home to me, amore. Not because you have to, but because you want to." The next morning, as I packed my bags and prepared to leave Villa Serenita, I found a final note from Dr. Alessandra tucked into my suitcase. "Cara Sophia, you came to us broken, believing you needed to change your body to be worthy of love. You leave us whole, understanding that you were always worthy. The world just hadn't taught you to see it. Remember these weeks when doubt creeps in. Remember that your worth isn't determined by a number on a scale or the desire in someone's eyes. It lives in your heart, in your spirit, in the beautiful soul you finally allowed yourself to see. With love and admiration, Alessandra." The drive from Villa Serenita to the Florence airport took 2 hours, winding through countryside so beautiful it made my chest ache. I watched Tuscany slip past the windows and felt a bittersweet mixture of sadness to leave and eagerness to return home, to return to Adriano. Not as the broken, desperate woman I'd been, but as someone new, someone stronger. The flight back to Milan was uneventful, but my heart rate increased with every kilometer closer to home. What would it be like to see Adriano after 2 weeks apart? Would the connection we'd been rebuilding still be there? Would he see the changes in me? Not physical, but internal? As we descended into Milan, I caught my reflection in the airplane window. The same face looked back at me, but something essential had changed. My eyes were clearer, calmer. The permanent crease of worry between my brows had softened. I looked like myself again. Or perhaps for the first time. Adriano was waiting at the airport, and my breath caught at the sight of him. He stood near the arrivals gate in dark jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the crowd with barely contained eagerness. Then our eyes met, and the world narrowed to just him. Just us. He crossed to me in long strides, not running, but moving with purpose. When he reached me, he simply stood there for a moment, his eyes traveling over my face as if memorizing every detail. "Bellissima," he breathed. "You're glowing." "I feel different," I said, setting down my bag. "I am different. I can see it." His hand reached up, cupping my face with that familiar tenderness that still made my heart race. "You look at peace, like you found something you've been searching for." "I found myself," I said simply. "The real me. Not the woman I thought I had to be for you or anyone else. Just me." He kissed me then, right there in the crowded airport, with travelers streaming around us and announcements echoing overhead. It was a claiming kiss, passionate and possessive, but also reverent, like he was rediscovering me all over again. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to mine. "Welcome home, amore mio. I've missed you every second of these 14 days. I've missed you too." I laced my fingers through his. "But Adriano, I need you to know, I'm not coming back to the way things were. I'm not the same woman who left. I know, and I don't want you to be." He picked up my bag with one hand, keeping the other firmly locked with mine. "I want this new woman, this strong, certain version of you. I want to meet her, know her, love her." As we walked through the airport toward the parking garage, I caught sight of us reflected in a storefront window. We looked good together, not because we were a perfect, glossy couple, but because we looked real, solid, connected. "There's something else," I said as we reached his car, a sleek black Maserati that had always seemed too ostentatious to me. "I've been thinking about my life, about what I want beyond being your wife." He opened the passenger door for me, but paused before I got in. "Tell me." "I want to go back to school, finish my degree in social work that I abandoned when we got married. I want to do something meaningful with my life, something that's mine." A slow smile spread across his face. "Then you should. Whatever you need, tuition, time, support, it's yours. Even if it means I'm not always available when you want me, even if I have my own commitments, my own priorities. Especially then." He kissed my forehead. "Sophia, I don't want to be married to someone who exists only to serve my needs. I want a partner, an equal, someone with her own life, her own dreams." As we drove through Milan toward home, I felt something settle deep in my chest. This was right. We were right. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and honest, and built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than desperation and need. "How were your 2 weeks?" I asked, realizing I'd been so focused on my own journey I hadn't asked about his. "Lonely," he admitted. "Productive, but lonely. I threw myself into restructuring the business, into being the kind of leader I want to be. But every night, I came home to our empty bed and counted the hours until you'd return. Did you ever doubt? Wonder if I'd come back?" He was quiet for a moment, navigating traffic. "No. I trusted that you'd come back because you wanted to, Not because you had to. That trust, that's what we've been building, isn't it? The faith that we're choosing each other freely, not out of obligation or fear. That night, in our bed, not the guest room I'd retreated to months ago, Adriano made love to me with a reverence that felt like worship. His hands explored every curve, every change in my body, lingering on the softness at my hips, the fullness of my breasts. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" he murmured against my skin, his lips tracing the curve of my waist. "I see a woman who survived, who fought her way back from the edge, who had every reason to give up on us and chose to stay anyway. That's what makes you beautiful, Sophia. That strength, that grace." I almost left, I confessed, my fingers threading through his hair. When I asked for the divorce, I meant it. I was done. I know. He kissed his way up my body, settling his weight over me. "That's why these past months have meant everything. Because you could have left, and instead you gave me a chance to earn you back, to prove I deserved you." "Do you?" I asked, the question only half teasing. "Deserve me?" He looked into my eyes, his own dark and intense. "I'll spend every day of the rest of my life trying to. That's my promise to you, amore. Not that I'm perfect, but that I'll never stop trying to be the man you deserve." As we moved together, finding the rhythm we'd lost and reclaimed, I felt the last pieces of my broken heart knit back together. Not perfectly. The scars would always be there, reminders of what we'd been through. But healed. Stronger in the broken places. Afterward, we lay tangled together, his hand tracing lazy patterns on my hip. "Tell me about Tuscany," he said. "Everything. I want to know what changed you." So I told him about Dr. Alessandra and her gentle wisdom, about learning to thank my body instead of hate it, about the moment I'd looked in the mirror and finally seen someone worthy of love. He listened without interruption, his hand never stopping its gentle exploration of my skin. "I'm proud of you," he said when I'd finished, "for doing that work, for being brave enough to face yourself." "I had to," I said simply, "because I realized I couldn't build a healthy marriage if I wasn't healthy myself. I couldn't ask you to love me if I didn't love myself first. And do you?" His voice was quiet, vulnerable. "Love yourself." I thought about it, really thought about it. I'm learning to. It's not perfect. There are still moments when I look in the mirror and see all the flaws, all the ways I don't measure up to some imaginary standard. But more and more, I see someone valuable, someone strong, someone worthy of taking up space in the world. "Good," he kissed my temple, "because you are. You always have been." We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. And I dreamed of futures instead of past pain, of possibilities instead of regrets. The next morning, I woke to find Adriano already up, standing on our balcony with his coffee, staring out at the city. Something about his posture, the tension in his shoulders, the way he gripped his cup, made me uneasy. "Adriano? What's wrong?" He turned, and I saw conflict written plainly across his face. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before, but I was afraid it would drive you away." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" He gestured for me to join him on the balcony, pulling me close against his side when I did. "The woman at Vincenzo, the one Lucia told you about." Old fear spiked through me. "What about her?" "There was no affair. I swear to you, Sophia. But I did meet with her, twice. Her name was Katrina, and she was." He paused, choosing words carefully. "She was trying to convince me to leave you, to marry her instead." The confession hit like a physical blow. Why would she? She's the daughter of one of my business associates. Her father wanted to strengthen our alliance through marriage. When you and I started having problems, when everyone could see how distant we'd become, she approached me, offered herself as a better option, a more suitable wife for someone in my position. And the word came out strangled, and I told her no, every time. I was cold to you, distant, but I never for a moment considered leaving you for her or anyone else. He turned me in his arms, forcing me to meet his gaze. I need you to understand this, Sophia. No matter how badly I was failing as a husband, no matter how broken we were, you were the only woman I wanted, the only one I could ever imagine spending my life with. Then why did Lucia's source say, because I was having dinner with her, trying to let her down diplomatically so her father wouldn't take it as an insult? The first dinner, I told her clearly I wasn't interested. The second, the one that happened right before you asked for a divorce, I told her in no uncertain terms that I would never leave my wife, that even if you divorced me, even if you left me, I would never marry anyone else. I pulled back, needing space to process. You should have told me. When all of this started, when we were rebuilding, you should have been honest about this. I know. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. Afraid you'd see it as just another betrayal. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. There's nothing going on with her, Sophia. There never was. But I should have told you the truth instead of letting you imagine the worst. I walked to the edge of the balcony, looking out at Milan waking up below us. 2 weeks ago, this revelation would have destroyed me, would have confirmed every fear, every insecurity. But now, thank you for telling me, I said finally, even if the timing isn't great. He moved behind me, his hands tentative on my waist. Are we okay? We're okay, I said, leaning back against his solid warmth. Because I believe you. Not because I'm naive or desperate, but because I know you now. The real you. And the man I know wouldn't lie to me about this. His arms tightened around me, his face buried in my hair. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, I agreed, and felt him flinch. But you're trying to, and that's what matters. 6 months after my return from Tuscany, I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom, adjusting the fitted blazer Lucia had helped me select. My first day back at university, 33 years old, returning to complete the social work degree I'd abandoned when I married Adriano. My stomach fluttered with nerves and excitement in equal measure. You look perfect, Adriano said from behind me, his reflection appearing in the mirror as he approached. He was dressed for his day as well, charcoal suit, burgundy tie, the uniform of a powerful man. But the way he looked at me held none of the cold distance of our dark years. Only pride and warmth. Bellissima and brilliant. I'm terrified, I admitted, turning to face him. What if I can't keep up with kids 10 years younger than me? What if I've forgotten how to be a student? He cupped my face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. Then you'll learn again. You're one of the strongest people I know, Sophia. You survived 2 years of a broken marriage, rebuilt yourself from the inside out, and chose to love again, despite having every reason not to. University will be easy compared to that. I laughed, some of the tension draining from my shoulders. When did you become so wise? When I nearly lost everything that mattered. He kissed my forehead, gentle and reverent. Now go. Show them what Sofia Romano Bianchi is capable of. The university campus was a sprawl of historic buildings and modern facilities, buzzing with students rushing between classes. I found my first classroom, Introduction to Social Work Theory, and slipped into a seat near the back, hyper-aware of being older than most of my classmates. First day back? The girl beside me asked with a friendly smile. She had purple streaks in her dark hair and multiple piercings, couldn't have been more than 20. Is it that obvious? only because you look how I felt last week when I started." She extended her hand. "I'm Kiara, second-year transfer student. Sophia, first-year, starting over student." I shook her hand, grateful for the kindness. "Well, Sophia, if you need a study buddy or just someone to grab coffee with between classes, I'm your girl." The professor entered then, a stern woman in her 50s named Dr. Ferrara, and the semester began. For 3 hours, I was absorbed in discussions of social justice theory, systems thinking, and the ethical foundations of social work. My hand cramped from taking notes, my mind buzzed with ideas, and I felt more alive than I had in years. This was what I'd been missing. Purpose beyond being someone's wife. A sense of identity separate from my marriage. When I returned home that evening, Adriano was already there. Another kept promise from our rebuilding. He'd restructured his entire business to ensure he was home by 7 every night, unless there was an absolute emergency. In 6 months, he'd broken that promise only twice, and both times he'd called immediately to apologize and explain. "How was it?" he asked, looking up from the stove where he was stirring something that smelled divine. Cooking had become his new hobby, his way of showing love through nourishment rather than expensive gifts. Incredible, terrifying, perfect. I dropped my bag and crossed to him, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind. "I have so much reading to do, and I'm meeting with a study group on Thursday, and there's this professor, Dr. Ferrara, who's absolutely brilliant." "Slow down, amore," he laughed, turning in my embrace to face me. "We have all evening. Tell me everything." Over dinner, perfect risotto with saffron and peas, I chattered about my classes, my new friends, the challenging assignments already piling up. Adriano listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was really hearing me, really caring about this new aspect of my life. "I'm proud of you," he said, as we cleaned up together, moving in the comfortable synchronicity we'd developed, "for having the courage to start over, to build something that's yours." "It wouldn't be possible without your support," I said, loading plates into the dishwasher. "The tuition, the flexibility, giving me the space to focus on school." "Sophia." He turned me to face him, his hands on my shoulders. "You don't need to thank me for supporting your dreams. That's what partners do. You've given me so much. Your forgiveness, your trust, a second chance I didn't deserve. This is the least I can do." Later that night, as we lay in bed reading, me with my social work textbook, him with a biography of some long-dead Italian politician, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. This quiet domesticity, this comfortable companionship, this was what I'd been missing during our dark years. "What are you thinking about?" Adriano asked, setting aside his book and rolling onto his side to face me. "About how different things are now. How we used to share this bed but be miles apart. Now we're actually here, present, together." He reached out, tracing the curve of my cheek with his thumb. "It's still work, you know. Every day, I have to consciously choose to be present, to not retreat into old patterns when things get stressful. It doesn't come naturally anymore. But you do it anyway. Because losing you taught me what really matters. Business, power, respect. None of that means anything if I come home to an empty house, to a wife who looks at me like a stranger." I closed my textbook, giving him my full attention. "Do you ever regret it? The changes you've made to your business, the power you've ceded to Marco and others?" He considered this, his expression thoughtful. "No. I'm more effective now, actually. Making decisions from a place of clarity rather than paranoia. Treating my people with respect instead of ruling through fear. It's built loyalty in a way threats never could." "Stefano said you're different with them now. More human." "Your brother-in-law talks too much," Adriano said, but there was affection in his voice. But he's right. I'm trying to lead the way my mother would have wanted. With strength, yes, but also with compassion. With honor. The semester progressed in a blur of classes, study sessions, and paper deadlines. I threw myself into my education with a passion I'd forgotten I possessed, staying up late to finish assignments, engaging in heated debates about social policy during seminars, building friendships with classmates who saw me as Sophia the student, not Sophia the Mafia wife. Adriano was my rock throughout it all, encouraging me when I doubted myself, celebrating my successes, commiserating over difficult professors. He proofread my papers, his sharp mind catching logical inconsistencies I'd missed, and quizzed me before exams, patiently holding flashcards while I recited theories and concepts. You know you're incredibly sexy when you talk about systems theory, he said one night while I was studying for a midterm, sprawled across our bed in leggings and one of his shirts, surrounded by textbooks and note cards. I looked up, surprised. I'm covered in highlighter marks and probably have coffee breath. How is that sexy? Because you're passionate, engaged, alive. He crawled across the bed, scattering note cards, until he was hovering over me. Because you're becoming more yourself every day, and watching you bloom, watching you find your purpose. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He kissed me then, and textbooks were forgotten for a while as we relearned each other's bodies with the familiarity of long-married lovers and the passion of new discovery. Every time we made love now, it felt like a promise renewed. A choice made consciously to choose each other, over and over again. Around the 9-month mark of our rebuilding, we had our first real fight since I'd returned from Tuscany. It happened over something seemingly small. Adriano had promised to attend one of my class presentations, but got called away for an emergency business meeting. He'd texted his apologies, but I'd stood in front of my classmates feeling his absence like a physical wound, all the old fears rushing back. When he came home that night, I was in the guest room, not because I was moving out, but because I needed space to process my feelings without immediately falling into old patterns of either silencing my hurt or lashing out destructively. Sophia? He knocked softly on the guest room door. Amore, please, let me explain. You promised, I said, opening the door but not inviting him in. You promised you'd be there. I know, and I'm sorry. But one of our shipments was seized by customs. If I hadn't handled it personally, 3 of my men would be facing federal charges right now. The explanation was valid, reasonable, but it didn't erase the hurt. I stood there talking about community intervention strategies, and I kept looking at the door hoping you'd walk through. Like an idiot. Like the desperate wife I used to be. Something shifted in his expression. You're not an idiot. And being disappointed when someone breaks a promise doesn't make you desperate. But what about next time? And the time after that? How do I know that when push comes to shove, you won't always choose the business over me? Adriano leaned against the doorframe, his exhaustion suddenly visible. You don't. I can promise. I can commit. I can do everything in my power to keep my word. But I can't control emergencies. I can't predict when my men will need me. So what do we do? I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. Just accept that I'll always come second? No, his voice was firm. We do what Dr. Chen taught us. We communicate. You tell me when I've hurt you and I listen. I apologize when I'm wrong. We figure out how to prevent it from happening again. And we trust that we're both coming from a place of love, not malice. I studied his face, the genuine remorse, the exhaustion, the love that was still so evident despite the tension between us. This was different from before. Before, he would have been defensive, cold, would have dismissed my feelings as overreaction. I'm still angry, I said finally. You have every right to be. But I also understand. and I appreciate that you're not making excuses or dismissing my feelings." He opened his arms, and after a moment's hesitation, I stepped into them. "I'm sorry I missed your presentation. Tell me about it, every detail." We spent the next hour on my bed, not the guest room bed, but ours, where we belonged. While I recounted my presentation, he listened intently, asked questions, made me feel like even though he'd missed the live event, he was still fully present for me now. "I'll do better," he promised, as we finally headed back to our bedroom. "I can't promise I'll never miss another important event, but I can promise I'll move heaven and earth to be there. And when I can't, I'll make it up to you." "How?" He smiled, that slightly wicked smile that still made my heart race. "You'll see." 2 days later, I came home from classes to find my entire study group, 6 people I'd been working with all semester, sitting in our living room. Marco and Stefano were serving them coffee and pastries, while Adriano set up a projector screen. "What is this?" I asked, completely confused. "This," Adriano said, gesturing to the assembled group, "is me making it up to you. I missed your presentation to the class, so you're going to give it again here, and I'm going to watch. And afterward, we're all going to celebrate your brilliance." My study group grinned at me, clearly delighted to be part of this scheme. "You're ridiculous," I said, but I was laughing, touched by the gesture. "I'm committed," he corrected. "There's a difference." So I gave my presentation again, on trauma-informed approaches to family intervention, to an audience of my classmates, my husband, my brother-in-law, and Marco, who kept asking surprisingly insightful questions. Afterward, Adriano had arranged for a full catered dinner, turning our living room into an impromptu celebration. "Your husband is extra," Chiara whispered to me while we ate, "but also kind of amazing." "He is," I agreed, watching Adriano charm my classmates with stories of growing up in Milan. "Very extra. And yes, amazing." As my first year of university drew to a close, I realized how much had changed in a single year. I'd gone from a woman who could barely look at herself in the mirror to someone who walked with confidence, from someone who defined herself entirely through her marriage to someone with her own identity, her own goals, her own life. Adriano and I had gone from strangers sharing a bed to true partners. We still had arguments, healthy ones, where we expressed our feelings and worked through conflicts instead of letting them fester. We still had moments of doubt, flashes of old fears. But we faced them together, with honesty and commitment. On the night before my final exam, social work ethics, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Adriano slept peacefully beside me and took stock of our journey. 2 years of misery. Months of painful rebuilding. A year of growth and change and choosing each other daily. "You're thinking too loudly," Adriano murmured, his eyes still closed. "I can hear your brain whirring from here." "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." "I'm not really awake." He pulled me close, tucking me against his chest. "Tell me what's keeping you up." "I was just thinking about how far we've come. How different everything is now." "Different how?" I considered the question, running my hand over his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath my palm. "Before, I was terrified of losing you. So terrified that I lost myself trying to hold on. Now, I know that if I lost you, I'd be devastated. But I'd survive. I'd be okay. And somehow, knowing that makes me love you more freely. Because I'm choosing you from a place of strength, not fear." He was quiet for a long moment, his hand tracing patterns on my spine. "You have no idea how much that means to me. Knowing you're here because you want to be, not because you need to be. And you? Do you still feel like you don't deserve me?" Every day, he admitted. But I've learned that's okay. That feeling, that awareness of how lucky I am, keeps me from taking you for granted. Keeps me consciously choosing to be the man you deserve. I lifted my head to look at him in the darkness. What if I told you that you do deserve me? That you've proven yourself over and over again? I'd say that's for you to decide, not me. But I'd be grateful every day that you think so. I kissed him then, slow and sweet, and felt the familiar heat build between us. After, as we lay tangled together, sweaty and satisfied, I felt something settle deep in my soul. This was it. This was the marriage I'd dreamed of when I'd walked down the aisle 3 years ago. Not perfect. We'd never be perfect. But real. Honest. Built on a foundation of mutual respect and conscious choice. Ti amo, amore mio, Adriano whispered into the darkness. Thank you for not giving up on us. Ti amo, I whispered back. Thank you for giving me a reason not to. The final scene of our story came 3 months later, at a small dinner party Adriano and I hosted for our closest friends and family. Stefano was there with his new girlfriend, a sharp-witted lawyer named Francesca. Marco had brought his wife, a gentle woman who ran a bookstore. Lucia came with her husband, the first time I'd met him. And Chiara, along with 2 other classmates, rounded out the group. As I moved through our apartment, refilling wine glasses, bringing out more food, laughing at jokes and stories, I caught Adriano watching me. He stood in the doorway to the kitchen, a glass of wine in his hand, and the look on his face made my breath catch. Pure love, pride, possession in the best sense of the word. Not ownership, but cherishing. What? I asked, crossing to him. Just admiring my wife. He pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my temple. Look at you, Bellissima, surrounded by friends, pursuing your dreams, so vibrantly alive. This is who you were always meant to be. We almost didn't make it here, I reminded him quietly. I know. That's what makes this so precious. We almost lost everything, and we fought our way back. We chose each other, even when choosing each other was hard. From the living room, Lucia called for a toast. Adriano and I joined the others, his arm around my waist, his warmth solid against my side. To Sofia and Adriano, Lucia said, raising her glass, to second chances, and the courage to take them. To love that survives the hard times, Stefano added. To marriages built on honesty, even when honesty is painful, Francesca contributed. Everyone drank, and then Adriano lifted his glass. To my wife, the strongest woman I know, the love of my life, the one who saved me from myself. His eyes found mine. Thank you for not letting me give up. Thank you for fighting for us even when I'd stopped fighting. Thank you for being exactly who you are. As glasses clinked and friends cheered, I felt tears prick my eyes. But they weren't sad tears. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of joy at having found my way back from the darkness. We'd survived. More than that, we'd grown. We'd taken a marriage that was dying and breathed new life into it. Not by pretending the damage never happened, but by acknowledging it, learning from it, and choosing differently. Later, after everyone had gone home and we were cleaning up together, another small ritual of partnership we'd developed, Adriano pulled me into his arms in the middle of our kitchen. Dance with me, he said, even though there was no music. There's nothing to dance to. We don't need music. We never did. So we swayed together in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and the remnants of a beautiful evening. And I realized this was the moment I would remember when I thought about our love story. Not the wedding day, though that had been beautiful. Not the dark years, though they'd taught us necessary lessons. This moment. dancing in our kitchen with dirty dishes in the sink and friends' laughter still echoing in the air, choosing each other, again and always. "I love you," I whispered against his chest. "I love you more." "Impossible." "Watch me prove it," he said, and I heard the smile in his voice. "Every single day for the rest of our lives, I'll prove it." And he did. Not perfectly. We were human, after all, prone to mistakes and misunderstandings. But consistently, faithfully, with actions that matched his words, and words that honored the truth. We'd been given a second chance, and we didn't waste it. We built something better than what we'd had before. Something stronger, forged in the fires of pain and cooled in the waters of forgiveness. A marriage, a partnership, a love that had been tested and had survived, and that, in the end, was everything.